everyone. Welcome, whether you're watching this live or recorded. Thank you for viewing. I'm Dr. Trey Asbury. I'm a professor, associate professor at Lincoln Memorial University, the host of this Zoom event. I am the director of a brand new master's program that we're going to be offering 100% online, general master's in psychology. If you're interested in that, it's kind of confusing just to give you the URL, but you can just go to lmunet.edu, and then under academics, just click on graduate programs, and you'll scroll down and see psychology, and that's where you'll see information about that program if you're interested. So I'm very pleased today to introduce Dr. Walt Isaac. He's a professor of psychology at Georgia College and State University. I don't know how you're both a college and a university, but you can.
You want to hear the whole story?
Maybe we'll save that for Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. There is a story behind it.
Okay. Gosh, over the years, Dr. Isaac, he's mentored a countless number of students, both inside and outside the classroom. You're actually looking at one right now. Several years ago, I'm not going to say how many, Dr. Isaac played a very crucial role, not only in my professional life, but my personal life as well. He provided encouragement and instilled confidence in me during a time when I needed it the most. His talk is entitled Learning in the Lab, and I'm looking forward to him sharing some stories. He's a great storyteller. Some of the stories he's promised to share with us today. And I'll just say, while I learned a lot of techniques and procedures in his biopsychology lab, I really learned more about how to mentor and serve my own students. And in all honesty, I'm certain that I would not be in my current position without his support. And I'm honored to call him a lifelong friend and introduce him as the second presentation speaker of the day. Welcome, Dr. Isaac.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asbury. It's nice to be able to say that also, Dr. Asbury.
Thank you.
I hope you're not too distracted. I've got my notes off to the side here. I need notes to keep me on track. If I don't keep up on track, I'll go all over the place. So I'm going to be glancing over here. Yes, sir.
Oh, I forgot to mention, if anybody that's participating live, we have some time at the end. I'll let you know, Walt, when we're getting close to that time. For some Q&A, but along the way, anybody that's viewing with us, if you want to post questions in the chat, then I'll address those. I'll read those out to you when we're done with the presentation part.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Thank you. Well, it's very nice to be here today, and thank you for the invitation to do this. When Dr. Asbury asked me initially to participate in your Zoom-A-Palooza, I asked him what topic should I consider, and he said he left it open to my decision, to my discretion. And we'll see how that goes today, won't we? Okay. Well, I started making notes right off the bat. Within that same day and coming back to them the next day, I started making notes, started writing down some ideas of things I might say today. And then along the way, I started to write out things more completely, flesh out my notes a little bit. And then I decided to reconceptualize the whole thing. And what I don't want to be the typical research presenter in which all I do is present my research and you go from one experiment to another experiment to another experiment. We could do that, but I'm confident I'm far more enthusiastic and excited by my research than you might be after the first 15 minutes. So what I decided to do is weave in, to tell basically my life story in many respects, not in high detail, but a lot of information about how I grew up and the formative events that I feel really shaped my life and where I'm at now, and try and along with those life stories, weave in a few lessons. Well, a few lessons. I ended up with 10 lessons ultimately that I was going to weave into the story here. So I hope this works out well for you. Let's get started. And we're going to start with lesson number one, actually. Lesson number one, do not procrastinate, okay? I tell my students, procrastination is a choice. It's not a lifestyle. And regarding not procrastinating, like I said, I started working on this the day after Dr. Asbury invited me. And I've been reworking it, re-editing it, everything ever since. And as late as yesterday afternoon, I was editing what I was going to say to you today. So don't wait for a deadline to arise. Don't say, I work better under pressure. Nobody really works better under pressure. You just finally have to work. And that's why you get going and do so well then. So don't procrastinate. Stay ahead of all deadlines. Quickly though, leading us into lesson number 2, proofread and edit your papers. Please, I know you hear this all the time, but take mercy upon your faculty, please. They're reading a lot of papers on every term. They have to read a series of papers, and most of them can be better. Every now and then you get that gem, that one in which the student really put some work into, edited, proofread, and just turned in a really stellar work. But for the most part, we can do better than what we do. Use spell check, use grammar check. They're there in your word processing software. Make use of them, pay attention to them. You may override them, but and say, no, it's spelled correctly, or this grammar is just the way I want it. That's fine, but at least you've thought about it, okay? Skim through your work backwards. It's amazing what will leap out at you as far as moving backwards through it. It won't make sense in a way, but things leap out at you when you read backwards. So that's an important step to include in your proofreading. Try and take all the common language or lingo out. You're not writing a text message to your professors. You're not writing an email to your professors. Even your email should be written completely and formally to your professors. But make your presentation formal, okay? This is also practice for the workforce. When you get out of college and you have that job, you're likely to be having to submit reports or write memos or something, and you want to have it look good for you. And so these are all skills to get in the habit of exercising. Also, in the workforce, you're not probably going to find that they want long, wordy, repetitive papers like you get rewarded for in college, okay? They're going to want you to get to the point, say it succinctly, concisely, and be done. And so you need to practice that while you're in college as well. In my senior seminars, my students are great writers for the most part, but they write that traditional lengthy paper, and there's going to be repetition built in there. There's going to be wordiness built in there, extended phrases that aren't necessary. So I assigned them, instead of the traditional paper for their senior seminar that they take with me, whatever the topic is, I assigned them a comic book chapter to do. I have them buy Comic Life software, which is downloadable, it's fairly inexpensive. And they have to do a minimum 20-page comic book chapter. And that forces you, that format forces them to be very concise, to have their little speech bubbles or thought bubbles. It also gets them to be creative, because they have to come up with a storyline to have their information flow on. And it works out very well. And at the end of the semester, I have a title page, I do a table of contents, I write a preface, I write an introduction, and they each have their chapter. I put them in alphabetical order by last name. And then we have the appendices, which have all the assignments that they've done for the individual assignments, group assignments, the syllabus, anything that we did for the course goes into one of the many appendices, maybe 5 appendices actually. And we end up with a class book that's digital that I post that they can download and have in PDF. And they come out to being anywhere from 350 pages to, I think last semester we had one that approached 470 or 80 pages in length, which is pretty good work for a semester, okay? But that sort of notion of being concise and to the point is important. Okay, more lessons. Let's see. As we go along, I'll be giving you more lessons and life stories. So for example, I'm going to start off right now with the fact that I'm a baby boomer. And you need to keep that in mind because, of course, that's going to influence what I say and how I may say it, okay? But my father, going back to the old family, my father was a physiological psychologist, and that's what we now call a behavioral neuroscientist, okay? My area of specialization happens to be behavioral neuroscience, so I followed in my father's footsteps on that. Clearly, he was a major influence. My mother was a registered nurse. She also went to night school for a while to be trained as a histologist, so she could process tissue in his lab. And she taught his graduate students histology, and she taught me histology as well. Well, all of this translates into me spending a lot of time in my father's lab when I was growing up. When my mother was at work, if I was not in school, I'd be in my dad's lab. And that's not to say that I didn't spend a lot of time outside playing. I ran through the woods. I ran through this. We had a great field next to us that was filled with broom sedge. And it was a great play area for me and the kids in the neighborhood. But when I wasn't in school and when I wasn't able to be at home because one parent wasn't going to be there, I was in my father's lab with him. And both he and his graduate students were wonderful. They would teach me things, they would show me things, they'd explain things to me. And so that was just a wonderful environment. When I got to graduate school, I don't know if I ever told my dad this or not, but I would refer to going to his lab as his form of daddy daycare. Okay, it was the daddy daycare facility, and it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful to go to. His lab was amazing to me, and so I got exposed to, because he worked with non-human subjects. Okay, when I was growing up, I was in a lab that had lab rats, which actually are delightful critters to work with. I'm not going to go out to a wild rat and pick it up, but a lab rat, they're quite pleasant animals. Had a group of cats that he used in research. He used rhesus macaques in research. And along the way, he switched from rhesus macaques to squirrel monkeys and owl monkeys. They're smaller, more easy to use. And one is a diurnal critter, so they're active in the daylight like we are. And the other is a nocturnal animal, but they live in the same trees. And so there was a lot of good cross research to do between those two species to compare how the different systems worked. Let's see. Well, in that lab, because they made everything, they were self-sufficient. There was a wood shop and an electronics shop. So I also got many lessons in building things and wiring circuitry up. And I still use those lessons, and I teach my students those lessons as much as I can. But I have a very fond memory of in the early years, when I was about 4 years old, actually, my father had me for the day, and he had a busy day ahead of him, but he also had a group of rats that he needed to shape the bar press in an operant chamber. And so early in the day, he took me back to the room, soundproof room that had the operant chambers in them. And he taught me how to shape a rat's behavior to get it to press the bar. And then he put a naive rat in, and watched me do it and made suggestions, gave me tips, and corrected things that I might have done incorrectly. And then he started bringing a new rat to me about every 20, 30 minutes. And I would sit there. I was absolutely fascinated and engaged for the full day as I shaped rats all day long, probably, and got his rats ready for him to start his research project. And that was absolutely wonderful. But you have to keep in mind that also a lab like that is a 7-day a week process. It's quite a workload, really. And so even on the weekends, he'd go in on Saturday and Sunday and have to do something in the lab regarding the maintenance of the colonies or the students and his research. And I took great delight in going along with him. It was what I consider to be an enriched learning environment for me. Along the way, in the summer between my 8th and 9th grade years, I asked if I could participate in his summer course that he was teaching a group of graduate students. It was a small group of 5 or 6 graduate students that were going to take a practicum course with him. And it was a surgery practicum course. So he was teaching them how to do brain surgery on rats. And he agreed. And so I sat in with the graduate students and I learned that procedure basically, or those procedures, because there were 2 or 3 different techniques that we learned in that process. The graduate students got a kick out of that also, and they also helped me along with it. But ultimately, that came in handy when I applied to graduate school, because that was experience that I had that a lot of applicants don't have, which really brings me to lesson number 3. Take advantage of any available learning opportunity. If there's a faculty member that's doing something that you're interested in, or whether they offer it to you or not, ask. If it's not going to be possible for you to participate, they'll tell you. But if it is possible, they'll pull you in and incorporate you in the project. And that's going to be a great learning opportunity for you. Well, I'm going to fast forward a couple of years from being between 8th and 9th grade to graduating from high school. I graduated on a Friday night. And on Saturday morning, I was over at the University of Georgia's registration, late registration. So most of the classes were filled, but there were classes that had seats. And I registered for classes which started on Monday. So I started summer school right after finishing high school. And took 3 classes, took full course load. It was the quarter system. So the three classes were a full course load in the quarter system. And went full-time year-round from that point for a couple of years. As I started out, I knew I was interested in psychology. My dad had the line of research he was doing, the work he had done, had really grown in me. And I knew that was the direction I would be happy going in. But I also knew that I owed it to myself to look around, make sure that this is the path you want to follow, and not that there's some other shiny object out there that's more attractive to you. And so I used my undergraduate core courses as a way of exploring what I might prefer doing, if there was something I would prefer over psychology. So I entered college as an undecided major, and started taking a wide variety of classes through that. So lots of introductory courses the first 2 years, or first 2 years of course credit, which went faster than 2 years. So for example, my introductory physics sequence taught me a very good lesson. It spoke volumes, and I did not go into physics. Inorganic chemistry, that sequence taught me a similar lesson, but organic chemistry actually went well. I didn't, inorganic chemistry went well enough that I did go to organic, and organic was okay. But I chose not to go to chemistry because of various reasons. But biology, history, sociology, philosophy, Spanish, English classes, the various literature classes, and a word etymology course. I highly recommend if you can take a word etymology course, the history of words, the history of the language. It was the English language history. Fascinating topic, absolutely fascinating topic. But everything else didn't really pull me in as much. With math, I got through Calculus 2 and was considering Calculus 3 and thinking about math major, but it was also time to take my Intro to Psychology course. I put it off as long as I could. And so I took Intro to Psych, and that was it. I knew that I was going to be a psychology major, that I didn't need to worry about math as a major or these other topics. I was going to be a psychology major. And one of the beautiful parts about the psych major is such an interdisciplinary topic, multidisciplinary topic. It allows you to go in so many different directions. And so with that, with its breadth like that, I did deliberately try and bias my psychology major as an undergraduate towards the biopsych end of things. Now, certainly I did take some, abnormal psych and social psych and some of these other psychology courses that I had to take. But anything that was in the direction of biopsych, I definitely took those courses. Well, all of that led me into psychology, obviously. And I still tell this to my students today because a psych major can go so many different directions. We have psych majors that graduate and go into med school. They go to law school. They may go to psychology. They may go to social work, counseling, school psychology, speech pathology, a variety of different areas that our psych majors go to for their master's degrees. Well, I knew I was aiming for graduate school in physiological psychology, or what we now call behavioral neuroscience. So I biased those courses, my courses, in that direction, as I said. But that leads us to lesson number 4. Be thoughtful when you select your major. You want to be happy with it over time, okay? Well, as I mentioned, I started college on the heels of high school, and I continued year-round with full course loads until I was approaching what would have been what marked me as a junior, even though I was ahead of my 3rd year. I was hitting this in my 2nd year of college. And I said, it's time to slow down. Why am I trying to get out of college so fast? I need to slow down and just graduate with my classmates that I entered with. And also enjoy college a little bit more, take more time to savor the college experience. And that prompted my mother to enter the picture and say, you might want to get a job if you're going to slow down on your college classes. It's going to give you more time. So why don't you get a job also? I was like, oh, okay. So I started looking at options, what options were available to me. And again, this is when my mother stepped into the rescue. She had found out about, as a nurse, she had found out that the local vocational school was getting ready to offer a basic emergency medical technician course in the evenings. And that would fit perfectly with my college, because I was in college by day, and then I became a vocational student at night. And I went through that course, and it ended sometime during the summer of that year. And I took the state certification exam, passed that, went out and applied for jobs at the 2 hospitals in Athens. And the county hospital hired me. And so I started working there. Now, they have a probationary period when you get hired in that position, as many jobs do. And it was a 3-month probationary period, as I remember. But they worked with me on this. And the standard was to have you start your probationary period on day shift. And so fortunately, with the quarter system, I got the job in time to be able to do my day shift tour of duty before classes started. So it would not interfere with my college experience. And then I went into the afternoon shift, and then got experience with the night shift. Fortunately, as I was finishing up my probationary period, I asked for being assigned to the afternoon shift, and they agreed to that. It worked beautifully with my school and working. And I was working full time at that point. So it was a 40-hour-a-week job along with the college classes. Well, part of the reason why I wanted afternoon shift was it was more exciting. It was more interesting. Things happened. There were more medical emergencies and treatment situations that occurred in the afternoon shift than during the day shift. Day shift was pretty much transfer patients home, transfer patients from their home to the hospital, or transfer patients from one hospital to another hospital. And that just did not excite me. And the other thing was the administrators were there until 5 o'clock. Not that we ever did anything that we couldn't do in front of an administrator, but it's just a matter of it was a little more relaxed environment without the administrators around. So I asked for afternoon shift and got that. Occasionally I had to work a night shift. That was fine. About 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. was really a rough time to get through. I had trouble keeping my eyes open for that period of time going night shift, but it could be done. So at any rate, working there along the way, it was probably the next spring. So this was starting, in the summer of the previous year. The next spring, they started to offer us a training course, 2 training courses actually, one for cardiac technician training and one for advanced EMT training. And Georgia has 3 levels: the basic EMT, cardiac tech, and advanced EMT. And to be an advanced EMT or a paramedic, you have to have the previous 2 as well as the 3rd certification. And so they designed these courses. We went through them as a group. We went to Atlanta when we finished the training and took the cardiac technician exam and the advanced EMT licensing exam on the same day, and we all passed both exams. And so we became paramedics and worked along that way. Now, one of the nice things about the the ambulance service that I was hired into was at that point in history, this is the late 1970s, a long time ago, but late 1970s, the hospitals had their own ambulance services. And there's probably still some hospitals that have their ambulance services, but it's not quite as common as it used to be. So I literally was based in the emergency room with our ambulance service. So when we were not out on a call, we would work as emergency room technicians in the ER, and we would assist the nurses and we would assist the physicians. And fortunately, the nurses and physicians were a great group that actually were excited about teaching us new things. And so we got a lot of experiences that we wouldn't have gotten if we were just stationed in some remote location waiting for an ambulance call to come in. We got to stay active and do primary patient care during our shift. And occasionally, if we were needed in ICU, they would send us to ICU to work the shift up there as technicians. And that was always, or someplace else in the hospital potentially. And that was always quite interesting and enjoyable as well. So it gave us a lot of different experiences. Let's see, let me get back on track. I started to wander off a little bit. Oh yeah, that's where I was going with this. Lesson number 5, gap years, okay? Gap years are those years that follow getting your bachelor's before you do your next educational experience, whether it be law school, med school, grad school, whatever it is, okay? That's the time that you spend between getting degrees. And a lot of students hesitate about gap years. I endorse them. I think gap years are a wonderful experience and a wonderful time to gain new experiences. But a lot of students are hesitant. And so I have students come to me and talk to me about it. They say, oh, I just need to go straight from undergraduate school, straight into graduate school. And my basic question is, that's fine, but why? Why do you need to go straight into graduate school? Have you thought this through? And I get 2 basic responses typically. One is, I'm afraid that I'll forget how to study. Really? You've been in school how long? How many years have you been in school? Between 4 years of college, potentially, maybe 5, sometimes 3. But your college years, your high school years, middle school years, elementary school years, on back. How long have you been in school and you think you're going to forget how to study? Are you serious? I don't think that's going to be a problem for you. And then they go to the next response, or the next one is the first one they come up with. If I don't do it now, I won't ever do it. And that's when I look at them and say, so you're not very motivated about what you want to do yet, are you? You haven't really decided what you want to do. If you're not sure that you'll continue straight, come back to it in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now, what makes you think that it's really what you want? They get a little defensive about that idea. They wrestle with it a little bit. But my thought for them is that if you do take a gap year, 1, 2, 3 years away from school and still want to work in that field, that is still your goal for employment, a career, then you know you're committed to it. And it is something you're going to be happy with over the long haul, okay? As opposed to just going straight into it and finding out, not quite what I expected it to be. Sometimes a third response comes up to it. And the third place response is, my parents want me to stay in school. And that's when I go, why? They don't want you at home? Well, it may not be that they don't want you at home. It could be insurance purposes. It could be tax deduction purposes. There's different reasons why they may say, no, you need to stay in school. But it's for you to think about and to decide doing, okay? You need to be careful and make that decision yourself if possible. I say do not be afraid of gap years. One, they can be refreshing. You've been through college. You need maybe 6 months, a year off just to recharge your batteries. They also are a time to try out your career options. And this is the most important aspect of it in my mind. Trying out your career options. What educational path is the best one for you to pursue next? Okay. The other thing you need to consider is those work experiences can be a major plus for you when it comes to applying to graduate school or med school or law school, whatever the advanced degree is going to be in. Because if you take a job that relates to the direction you want to go, those experiences are applicable to it. And when you write your application materials, you're going to have an essay you're going to have to write. You can talk about how your work experiences have not just better prepared you for their advanced degree program, but you can also talk about how it has affirmed your decision to pursue this degree. Okay. And that is a big selling point for med school, law school, or graduate school. They like to see that. Another thing is that we have to be thoughtful about, are you going to use that degree? You have to ask yourself that as you're going in. Am I going to be happy with this degree? Am I going to be happy with this career when I come out of school? What am I going to do with this degree? The reason why I bring that up is it's all too often now, especially, we're seeing, I think, a little more often, perhaps, at least I hear about it more often. People finishing med school, finishing law school, finishing graduate school, maybe in clinical psychology or some other field of psychology, and saying, well, that was nice, but you know what? That really turned out not to be what I want to do for my life. I got the degree, but I don't want to use it. I'm going to go find something else to do. You took a seat away from somebody 4, 5, 6 years ago. That person that you took a seat away from is now doing something that they may or may not be really happy with, but they're there. And now you've gone and wasted that seat. You took the degree, you took the seat, but you prevented that other person from getting it. So by being a little more thoughtful and taking a little bit of time during a gap year or two to find out if you really do like social work, get a job in child services. That'll challenge you. But if you still want to be a social worker after that experience, then yes, apply to social work. But it's a matter of, you need to try it out first to really be certain. Don't take a seat away from somebody that would have used that degree once they're done. Well, like I said, it also shows commitment, and graduate programs are going to want to see that. It also allows you to mature a little bit. That's another thing that actually med school, law school, and graduate schools are looking for more so today than they did 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was more the norm to go straight from college into your advanced degree program then, even though they liked gap years then also. It's just that it was a little more common perhaps. But it allows you to mature a little bit more, and they want a little more mature person coming into those programs these days. And the other thing a gap year does, or two, as I've been suggesting, is it allows you to take a little bit of every paycheck and put it into a savings account. Because when you quit your job and you go to that advanced degree program, you're going to need a little money on the side to help you survive, and to maybe buy yourself a treat every now and then, or to pay your rent, whatever. So when you're on your gap years, don't just spend it as it comes in. Put some aside for savings as well. Okay, well, that is going to make me bounce back to undergraduate students and being an undergraduate. And that's lesson number 6. Get research experience. If it's available, take advantage of that research experience. While you're an undergraduate, any research you do at this point, doesn't matter what it's in, anything that's available to you is going to be an advantage. As I'm sort of skipping a lot of information here, but I'm going to reveal to you that currently My two research subjects that I've worked with are crickets and tardigrades, right? What the heck's that all about? Well, I have students that come into my lab, get research experience working with crickets, behavioral testing with crickets, and they apply to clinical psychology programs. They apply to medical school programs and law school programs. And they like to see that research experience. They don't care what kind of research you did. They want to see that you did some research. It's a credential that you're bringing with you. Doesn't matter what kind. Now, if it's really right up the alley of the degree program you're going into, wonderful. But it doesn't really matter. Just if you have that experience available to you, take advantage of it. The other place that comes into play a role is with letters of reference. Think about it for a moment. You're in my class for one semester. Scary proposition, perhaps, but just imagine. You're in my class for one semester, and you sit there, you take notes, you take the tests, you write the papers, and you leave the class. What have I learned about you? Not much. Not much at all. I need to know you better than that to be able to write you a meaningful letter of reference, excuse me. At this point, what could I write about you? Well, they came to class, they turned their assignments in on time, they took all the tests and performed well, and they seemed like a nice but quiet person. That's not going to get you into graduate school or med school or law school. You need to do something more than that. Let the faculty get to know you that you're going to be asking for letters, okay? So if you do research with them, those students that do research in my lab, in all the labs in my department, those students we know better than anybody else in the major. And those students get the strongest letters of support for their graduate applications. The better the faculty member knows you, the better the letter is going to be. If research experiences aren't available, that's not a problem. You know, it'd be nice if they were, but it's not a problem. What you do is you visit your faculty. You go to their office hours. You talk to them about the course that you're in with them. Maybe you go in and you just ask to talk about their graduate school experiences. What did you do in graduate school? What was the application process like? What sorts of programs do you think are the programs to be considering, or what schools? Is there a geographical range that I should be thinking about, perhaps? Anything about your next degree. Just talk to them. Let them get to know you. If they're open to going to lunch, you know, go to the student center, get lunch with them sometimes, and just talk about stuff. Let them get to know you a little bit better. Talk about the major, talk about your coursework. Maybe they have suggestions of other classes you should take. Students that are in my lab or in my classes that say, oh, I want to go do psychopharmacology in graduate school. I'd say, look, that's fine, that's great with your psych degree, but you're not going to be taken seriously if in this environment, if you don't have chemistry, organic chemistry, maybe biochem, maybe physiology under your belt as well. You're going to need to take some other classes outside of psychology to get the credentials for a psychopharm lab to actually accept you into it, because it's gotten so technical as a field. It used to be a lot easier to get into that. So think about how well your faculty know you before you ask them for a letter of reference, okay? And do things proactively to get them to know you better. Don't be a stranger. Okay, let's see, where am I on my notes here? Well, for me, as it happens, my father's interests in the lab and the research I got to do in his lab were perfect for the program that I actually got accepted. I got accepted to 2 graduate programs. The one I chose to go to was the one that was the most similar to his line of research, which was very much my line of interest. And I went to the University of Kentucky for graduate school. It was a wonderful experience up there. Lots of research experience and opportunities to get teaching experience, etc. Well, my major professor was interested in behavioral recovery function following brain injury, matched up perfectly with mine. He was interested in the prefrontal cortical system, which matched up with mine interest. And he was also interested in the hippocampal system, which I knew very, 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 very little about, and found to be a fascinating system to do research in. But it was perfect for me. So that's where I went to graduate school and got lots of experience there. Actually, in that graduate program, it was kind of like a double graduate major. I had to do all the coursework of and things that were required for the program requirements of the behavioral neuroscience program, but I also had to do it for the learning psychology program. So I came out both a behavioral neuroscientist / learning psychologist when I graduated. Well, I did my research in graduate school with rats. I worked with the full age range of rats. I worked with rats as young as 1 day old, all the way up to rats that were over 3 years of age and right at the end of their lifespan. So I worked with the full lifespan range of development with rats. And that was interesting. I gained experience with mice. Don't like working with mice. I don't work with mice anymore. One time was more than enough, but it was an experience that I needed to have. I worked with pigeons along the way a little bit. And while I really don't want to work with pigeons anymore, they are fascinating animals to do research with. And if I had the opportunity to collaborate with someone, I would do it. They're a really neat sort of critter to work with. But these were important lessons for me to learn. What species do I not want to work with? What species do I want to work with? This sort of thing is very important. And that leads me to lessons number 7 and number 8. Lesson 7, collect research experience. If it's available, get all the research experiences you can. These are experiences that will be important when you're making decisions in the future. Plus, those experiences really do round you out to really make you a stronger researcher. I'm just checking the clock here. Running long, I think. Sorry. Lesson 8, I'll pick up the pace a little bit. Actually, there's 2 parts. This lesson was reinforced by both my father and my major professor in graduate school. Part A is, if the job market is good, why do a pre-doctoral fellowship or postdoctoral fellowship? Those are options if the job market is weak at the time. There's not many jobs available. Or if you feel that you need to be broadened out, you need some new techniques to take with you, go for those. And part B is, if you do a pre-doc or a postdoc, do one that will teach you new techniques or approaches, right? Do not go to the pre or postdoc that's doing just exactly the same thing you've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years in graduate school. Get something new. They should be growth opportunities. Okay. Well, along the way, I left where I was, where Dr. Asbury got his thesis with me done. And I came to Georgia College, and I worked with rats here for a while. And I chose to shift from rats. I started to wear out on rats because I was having to take care of rats 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. We don't have an animal caretaker. No one on the weekends to take care of them. No one during the summer to take care of them. So it was all on me. And I was getting tired of that. And so I was looking for another line of research, actually. And this kind of brings me to lesson 9, which is always have 3 or 4. And my major professor and my father also taught me this one, but always have 3 or 4 lines of research interests that you can rotate between, partly due to funding opportunities, perhaps, partly because you burn out on one and you want to just shift for interest purposes to another, that sort of thing. But always have more than one line of research available to you. Well, as I said, rats were wearing me out, so I was going to switch to crickets. And fortunately, we had just hired a newly minted, youthful, energetic PhD who she came in wanting to work with rats. And I talked to her about it, and I let her know where I was with it. And she was more than excited to take over the rats. And I offered backup on weekends and holidays if she needed it when she traveled. But I switched to house crickets. If you go to the bait store and buy crickets for fishing, that's a house cricket that you're buying. They're inexpensive, and they're wonderful to work with, actually. Which brings me to lesson number 10. I had 10 lessons. We're at number 10. Adapt as your interests or things in your environment change, right? And so with crickets, I had to do a lot of adapting because it was a whole new line of a whole new species and the work that was going on with them. And I could tell you some more stories about crickets, but I'm thinking I need to get to the question answer session. So what I'm going to do is skip through this. Also did work with fish, by the way, along the way, both Siamese fighting fish and goldfish. But most recently, I've added tardigrades to my list. And let me see, Dr. Asbury.
Yes.
Do I need to cut off at this point, or do I still have time?
You're doing great. We probably need to make sure that we sign off by 5 till noon to give everybody the full lunch break.
Okay. Okay.
We do have a couple of questions here for you.
Okay.
So I don't want to rush you, but I would say we need to wrap everything up within the next 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay. Okay. I can do it quicker than that, but let me share my screen for a moment. I'm going to go to some PowerPoint slides real fast. And I was going to share screen. I don't know if this is desktop 1 or not. Let's try it. Let's say share. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Yes. Why is it? Okay, this is fine. Okay, here we go. This is my, if it wants to start, this is my list of 10 lessons real fast, just in case somebody said, golly, he went through all those 10 lessons and he never really let us see them. Here's the list. It's on video. So they're there. But what I just wanted to do is sort of skip through a few posters that we recently, or in the last 10, 15 years, have presented. This is the latest and greatest thing that we presented. One of 3 things we presented last week at the Southeastern Psychological Association. Started doing some behavioral research with tardigrades, trying to see if we could behaviorally evaluate what wavelengths of light they're sensitive to. And we found that they are very sensitive to ultraviolet and to green, as well as white light. They like being in the white light as opposed to shadow. They avoided ultraviolet light. They didn't really care whether they were in the blue or the shadow, but they really liked being in green light.
Dr. Isaac, let me just interrupt for a second. If you were sharing your screen, we don't
It's
see
not
it.
showing.
No, we just see you, which is
Just see me?
great.
Well, no, well, that's wonderful. I'm giving you a close-up of my face, but it's supposed to be sharing my screen. I apologize. I will skip this part then. I clicked on everything I thought to share. Sorry. I can send you those slides though, Trey.
Can you, I'm going to type your email address into the chat.
Okay.
People can reach out to you that way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Excellent. Thanks for letting me know that I was giving you a close-up of my face and not of my slides.
So since we are short on time, thank you so much for those lessons, excellent lessons, all of them. So I'm going to start with the first, just from the top. First, a comment. Deborah Brown says, "Save money during your gap year. Best advice ever." Anita Black, who you see her face here as part of the Zoom. She's the director of our Master's in Criminal Justice program.
Great.
She asks, or she says, "I really like your advice for students to check writing and grammar before submitting. I tell students to read out loud to catch errors.
Yes.
What else do you think can help students find language errors and writing mistakes / cohesion?"
Oh my gosh. I think between spell check, grammar check, and reading it out loud to yourself, I read my notes to myself repeatedly and found lots of things I needed to edit. But just looking at it, reading it backwards, those are my best suggestions. Maybe let somebody else read it. Let a stranger read it because they're not familiar with what you've said and they don't know what you meant to say.
Thank you. And so I had a question about, I could really relate when you were talking about letters of recommendation. And I've taught a number of online classes, and that's getting ready to be, hopefully, if we get enough enrollment, my full-time gig moving forward is working with online students. And so in the past, I've had some of those online students reach out and say, "Hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation?" And I want to help them, but I say, you know, the admissions committee is going to be looking at your transcripts. I can't say much other than you did well in my class, which they can already see on your transcript. So do you have any advice for providing more opportunities to engage with instructors online courses?
Well, I mean, if they're doing an online program, it is going to be more challenging. But that's where I guess they need to be particularly attentive to the papers they write and the other assignments they submit to you for evaluation, because that's characterizing them. But they need to schedule Zoom meetings with you, where you can just, instead of, since if they're not going to be able to come to your office, they're at least sort of in your office because they're meeting with you virtually. And even if it's once a week or twice a week, or you schedule a lunchtime in which you open yourself up to having a sandwich and sipping on your beverage, and they're on their end, even if it's a group, it could be a whole group of them, or it could be an individual, and you sort of have a Zoom lunch hour, something like that, or afternoon snacks or something. That's what I can suggest at this point. Yeah,
I like that. Thank you, because we want to keep the course requirements asynchronous, but I think I've already been thinking about ways to kind of have some optional times that we meet synchronously and together, like we used to call them brown bags. And
right, absolutely, and those would be great. And whether you required them or just made them optional, but brown bags, yes. And it could be a breakfast brown bag, a lunch brown bag, or a dinner brown bag, whatever fits into your and your class's schedule best. Because being asynchronous is something that some of them are going to be working when you have your brown bag session, and some are going to be available. So it might be two of them, one in the morning on Monday and one in the evening on, say, Wednesday or something like that.
Sure. Thank you. So does anybody, that's all the questions we have in the
They're in the look in the Q&A. There's 3.
Q&A. Okay.
Oh,
Very bottom.
Gotcha.
I want the softball questions. Okay.
So Brandon Bender, thank you for your question. The question is, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I'm in somewhat of a similar situation, working on a graduate degree and also working a graduate job, which requires a lot of hours on campus.
Yes.
What are some ways you were able to juggle all of the hours working, providing your best quality of work, and avoiding crowds?
Well, you may not like this answer because it's the way I did graduate school. Was, as far as graduate school, I was one of the first on campus in the morning. I'd get there between 7 and 7:30 in the morning, and I often wouldn't leave campus until somewhere around 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. and that was 7 days a week. So I had to have time for getting my research in, because I always had a rat study going of some sort. I had teaching responsibilities. I was a teaching assistant, and along the way became I was assigned lecture sections that I lectured to, and I had my own coursework to worry about. And so that just took a lot of hours of the day, and I just stayed in the department all day long, basically. As an undergraduate, when I was working for the ambulance service and doing college classes, fortunately, I'd cut back to 2 classes a quarter during the time I worked full time, and that helped a lot. But it was a time crunch. It was a time crunch. When I wasn't in the classroom during the day, I was working on the coursework so that by 2 o'clock I could start getting ready for work, because I had to report for work, at least 15 minutes early and be able to stay at least 15 minutes late for shift change.
Thank you. So let's see, like Matthew Friddle wants to know, when looking for research and opportunities for experience, could it be beneficial to look outside of their general focus, or could postgraduates specifically focus on their specific path?
No, I don't think it matters what the topic area is. We have psych majors that'll do research up in the criminal justice department, and it's just as good a research experience as it is if they do it with us in psychology. So I wouldn't worry about what type of research it is, as long as it's legitimate research. It's going to count in your favor.
I think that parlays back into my question about letters of recommendation too, that you alluded to. It's going to help them come up with somebody that can speak more about their reliability and their persistence and their critical thinking.
Yes, all very important issues.
Final question, this is from Deborah Brown. Given your research with light, what is your familiarity with photophobia with people?
Not much. That was a quick one.
Okay.
That I don't know much about. I do a lot of research with light with crickets and with tardigrades, and done some with rats. The only other light research that I was familiar with, the only other light research that I really paid attention to at one point was years ago. I interviewed at a school that the fellow was doing research with, oh gosh, it was a eating disorder, and they were trying to use, oh no, I'm sorry, they were working with SAD, seasonal affective disorder. And so they had students go in that reported they showed signs of SAD, read a book for an hour in front of a white light box. And the control group was read for an hour in front of a red light box. And happened that they had some females that had a eating disorder that actually the red light helped, apparently helped ameliorate the eating disorder to some extent. So he was going to pursue that. And I don't know where that line of research went, if it panned out or if it just turned out to be, well, it looked like it was there. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Isaac, thank you again so much for your time today. Really